Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started.
We are really honored to have as our guest as our episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, a third guy, not incredibly tall, but it's still a good friend of ours that we've known for quite a while, Jeff Clair from ClairVoyant Solutions. Jeff is also a fractional VP of sales, just like Kevin and I are, but he comes from a different portion of the country. He has different clientele. He has a totally different background, just like Kevin and I have different backgrounds as well. Jeff, welcome to the show. Tell us on 30 seconds a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's great to be here. As Sean had mentioned, yes, I'm a fractional VP of sales, and I come in to help small, medium-sized businesses relieve the owner or the CEO of the burden of trying to run a sales organization. ClairVoyant Consulting is powered by Sales Acceleration, and we really work to develop unique and customized tools to uplift the revenue stream of the companies we work for. Very business agnostic. It really doesn't matter what the business is. There's so many transferable skill sets and processes in the sales process that can really run from one industry to the next. I'm happy to be here. And, as we talked about locations in the country, I'm on the East Coast. I'm calling from Fairfield, Connecticut, the metro New York City area. And my customers are, for the most part, my clients are really in this area of the country.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate all you do. We appreciate you being on. Thanks for taking time out of your day. One thing that always gets my curiosity up when I'm talking to other sales leadership professionals and consultants is what they see is a market challenge. My market challenge question for you, Jeff, is this. Where do you see salespeople getting hung up in a deal, whether it's enterprise, repetitive sales, or anything? Where do you see salespeople really stubbing their toe?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. It's in a number of different places, and it's different for different salespeople. The first problem that comes about with salespeople in their organization is in most cases, there's not a defined or documented sales process. So they're kind of winging it. They're doing kind of their own things and where they're feeling comfortable. The first aspect, and for most companies, having a customer relationship management tool or a CRM really becomes important and helpful by defining the different stages of the sales process, going from getting the leads and getting a lead list to then developing your prospects, going through a discovery phase, a demonstration phase, a negotiation and closing stage. Depending on the companies you're working with, there could be, let's say, 8 defined stages of a sales process. There's different components you need to deal with at each different phase. And different people get hung up in different places. Universally, I would say most salespeople really get hung up trying to close a business. They're kind of afraid to ask and start that whole process. But with many salespeople and companies, it happens much earlier down the process, at the very beginning, as they're trying to figure out what they're doing.
We assume that we have some salespeople and some sales leaders tuning in, and even some CEOs. For the sales leader and CEO listening to this, where does this stubbing their toe show up in their pipeline or in their business for the clients you tend to work with?
Let me start with the very beginning. We'll start with developing leads and where some of the processes are with leads. Salespeople try to figure out, they'll kind of scattershot who they may know. They may do LinkedIn, who's connected to them. One of the first processes that I think companies should do is look at who are their best customers. Who are they doing business with today? What are the defining parameters of those customers? Business size, geographic location. Figure out who are they getting business with today, and then use that to say, okay, if I extrapolate that information, what type of a lead list would I start looking for that have some of those same properties involved? You close people that are very much like your best customers, and you're going to get the best business. So start with that. Then once you're developing that lead list, how are you going to go out and develop, and what type of contact points are done? Salespeople can get very nervous and they're not all built the same. How do you contact people you don't know? And what do you need to do? There's the true cold outreach, which has the least amount of success for everyone, but you get business that way. But how can you find ways of warming that lead up? What are the points of contact that can really help in finding those? And there's tremendous tools available today. We can talk for great length about artificial intelligence and other methodologies, but how do you find that 6 degrees of separation, that whole game of Kevin Bacon that was going on? That can be monumentally important to opening up the door and starting that process. So that's one of the first issues I would go through.
It's interesting you say that, Jeff, and thank you for starting that in that way. One of the things that I've noticed, and I'd love to have your comments on this, is I've noticed that a lot of companies that are small, our target market, don't do a great job of asking for referrals. Don't do a great job of saying, "Hey, Mr. Customer, you seem to be happy with my service, my product. Who do you know in your industry, maybe former coworkers, whatever, that I could talk to?" Do you get a better response than what I have seen in that area?
Sean, it's a great question because, in some cases, salespeople are very concerned that they don't have that many satisfied clients. And that's a whole separate problem to have. They're afraid in many cases to ask because then the problems are going to come out. Like, really, you want me to give you a recommendation? Your service has been XYZ. That's part of it. The best time to ask for those referrals and recommendations is really at the very beginning of the process, what I'll call the honeymoon phase. Before the company may have had some issues, usually the best time is once you sign a client on board. And if they've had a great experience and they're signing because they're very enthusiastic about the product or services they're ready to start using, that's the best time to try to get that referral or that recommendation, or ask for those references, write Google reviews, ways that people can find what you're doing and they're satisfied with the services.
I agree. I'm just amazed at how many companies or how many salespeople don't do that. And maybe it is because they kind of see the failings of their own company. And sometimes we can't, as VPs of sales, we can't necessarily fix those problems. They may be problems with customer service or production or design or whatever. They have nothing really to do with sales. We've gone through the process. We found a client, and the salesperson is seeing a little bit of heat because they have a brand new VP of sales in the form of you. And now they want to impress you by closing that deal as quickly as possible. Do you see problems there?
It's a big problem. And part of it, and one of the great attributes of having a CRM system, is the ability to see and analyze where a salesperson is getting stuck, because you can see that in the pipeline. Assume for a moment you've got a strong, dedicated salesperson that's built up a pipeline with a significant number of prospects that are in it. You can see by the depth and the movement in the time frame from one stage to the next where they're getting hung up. In many cases, you're getting a hang up from moving from lead to a prospect. But assume they've gotten the prospect, they've had a conversation. The issue happens in so many cases, particularly if they have metrics that they're trying to live up to for a VP of sales, is they rush to close. And when they rush to close, what tends to happen is they're now selling. They're a salesperson, so of course they think they're supposed to sell. But nobody really sells people anything. They think they may. Successful salespeople identify needs, desires, wants, and then satisfies those needs, desires, or wants with the product that they have or service that they have. You have to first take that time. There's a discovery time. Let that prospect talk a lot about their business. Ask open-ended questions. Find out a lot about the process. Once you've found enough about the product on the discovery side, then you're going to go into what you can call the demonstration side, talking about what services or product you have that's going to meet the need or pain point of your prospect. And during that time frame, it's really important to work on what I call test close situations. Prompt your prospect to get to that next step by saying something along the lines of, "John Smith, you mentioned you have an issue with this certain software you have. If I have the ability from demonstrating to you what my product has that it satisfies that issue and you're happy with it, is there anything that precludes you from closing? Something along those ways. You're testing the waters. And if they come back and say, you know what, that's yes. If you can get me to this position, I've got the budget, I've got the buy power, I would be ready to close. Now, when you do get to that point, you've done the discovery, you've gone through the position of demonstrating your products, you've answered questions, you remind your prospects. Earlier you said, if we were able to get to this point, you would be ready to buy. Are we ready to really talk about closing? You set the stage. And it may not happen all at the same call, but that's kind of a process. It's important.
I love the statement that you pulled in: CRM, metrics, process, and test close. That all resonates with me as a sales leader and what I love to hear from other people who are influencing buying behaviors. But I'm curious, if you had to wave your magic wand over every salesperson, what is the one hard question that you would have them always ask that they're probably not asking now? What's the hard question that needs to be asked in most selling situations, in your opinion?
Are there any other questions that you have? Are there any concerns you have? They're so just worried about opening up a Pandora's box, they don't want to open it. Just like most salespeople, not most, many, don't feel very uncomfortable asking, after all that work, asking for a decision to be made. Well, they'll get back to me on it. They don't want to push it. When they don't push it, nothing happens. And when I push it, you're just pushing is a strong word. They're guiding. A great salesperson is a guide. And they have to think of themselves that way. They're trying to guide them to the supposed promised land.
I love that analogy to say that a salesperson is a guide, because they really are. What I try to tell salespeople is they are experts in selling their product. They're experts in that thing. The prospect probably is not an expert in buying that thing many times, except for if you're selling a repetitive product like lubricants or something like that, something we just got done talking about in our podcast last few episodes. But many times we know more about our product, we know more about our industry, we know more about how to buy this thing than our customer ever does, because they just haven't bought that very often in their career or at that company. And so they struggle with, what do I do next? And how do I do this? And how do I ask for permission? I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well.
Those components are really important. Understanding the products and selling it with confidence. And in many cases, salespeople do need to bring in experts to the business. They're not, depending on what the product is, there could be a technical expert you bring in to go over those components of it. But one of the important parts is great salespeople are great storytellers. Because what you want to do is you want to take that prospect and put them in the seat of seeing themselves in that position. And you want to make the story about them so they become what's known as the hero of the story. And you kind of walk them through that. They see that as a guide, you are taking the hero to the finish line and trying to get them to really understand it, see themselves with the product or the service and how that really benefits what they're trying to do. And they see themselves from that from the get-go. It's really important in a story, and there's ways of doing it. It's a little more difficult. You could make yourself the hero, but that's not the place you want to be. You always, wherever you can, put that prospect in the story, the centerpiece, the protagonist, so to speak.
Jeff, you have just, I think, touched on what is a great topic, and I'm going to distill it the way I heard it is facts tell and stories sell. Jeff, if you're open to it, I tell you what, I'd love to have you back next week to expound on that. If you're game for it, we'd love to have you back for our audience to hear about how stories sell next week.
That'd be great. Love to do that.
Well, folks, we're right at the top of our 15 minutes. Jeff Clair, wonderful to have you on. Looking forward to having you next week. We'll unpack that next subject. Sean, always good to talk to you as well. Look forward to seeing you on the next side. And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop, where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.